The word Saywite comes from the Quechua language. Its translation varies depending on the translator's interpretation. One version renders it as a rock that indicates changes over time. Another conveys the opposite meaning, a rock of tranquility, or even simply a stop. In reality, Saywite is more than just a rock. It is an archaeological complex with scattered elements spread over an area of approximately 25 square kilometers. Some structures are made of barely worked stone, while others exhibit signs of polygonal masonry techniques. Traditionally, the complex is divided into two main sectors, upper and lower. The upper sector is a hilltop where several large platforms have been constructed. One of them holds the famous monolith. Another features a smaller platform and a structure composed of several separate rooms. In some areas, the bedrock of the hill is exposed. Descending towards the lower sector, a large cascade of 9 waterfalls flows down the slope. The platforms, the building, and the waterfall cascade are all made from roughly hewn or completely unworked small stones, held together with clay mortar. In the lower sector, Rumiwasi, there is another platform faced with unworked stone. Bati has a strict, almost regular shape and is accessed by a wide stone staircase. Nearby, there is an area containing structures of a completely different type. These include worked stones, the famous cracked stone, and several smaller stones. This area also contains remnants of polygonal masonry, with scattered polygonal blocks around it. To the east of the platform, standing separately, there is another stone with numerous carved configurations, officially referred to as an Intihuatana. The complex is considered part of the Incan heritage. It is known that rituals and ceremonies related to the worship of water were conducted here. Mythological beings responsible for fertility were revered. Members of the Saywite community, as well as pilgrims from other places, still use the local springs for ritual purposes. They wash the clothes of the deceased in them and perform bathing rituals to cleanse illnesses. Some researchers believe that the layout, orientation, and even the construction of Incan structures here were aligned with certain astronomical events, the positions of the Sun, the Moon, the Pleiades constellation, and the Scorpio constellation. Traces of cosmological symbolism can be found in one of the main attractions of this complex. The Saywite Stone is an ovoid-shaped monolith, over 2 meters in height and approximately 4 meters wide at its broadest point. Its lower half is smoothly polished. The upper half is covered with sculpted images. In total, there are 203 carvings. Among them, animal figures are the most numerous. Next are various natural and man-made elements, channels, steps, terraces, waterfalls, and structures with niches. There are also several depictions of corn. Anthropomorphic figures are present as well. On one side, separately, there is a depiction of a puma's head. Because of this, the rest of the stone is sometimes interpreted as representing the body of the animal. Along the edge of the stone, 38 holes are evenly distributed. It is believed that they served as drainage channels for water. However, another theory suggests that they once held golden figurines, which later became spoils of the Spanish conquistadors. This monolith has always attracted interest, not only from historians. In the 1970s, General Juan Velasco Alvarado even attempted to relocate it to Lima. The plan was to install the stone in one of the city's main squares as an original fountain and a symbol of Peru's ancient history. However, the idea could not be realized. Helicopters were unable to lift the stone. Later, the The next president, Fernando Belande, ordered 2 replicas of the Saywite Stone to be made. One of them can now be seen in Lima. It is the same size as the original and serves as a fountain. Nothing is known about the second replica he commissioned. The most widespread theory about the purpose of the Saywite Stone is that it represents a large-scale model of a settlement with a functioning irrigation system, including terraces, ponds, channels, and cascading waterfalls. There is speculation that it was used as a tool for forecasting agricultural production in different regions. Dr. Arlen Andrews suggests that the Incas used this model to test variations of irrigation systems. Indeed, rainwater flows well through the channels on the Saywite Stone. However, this alone is not sufficient to confirm that water distribution was the primary intent of its creators. It could have been a secondary feature, accompanying something more essential. Proponents of this theory believe that for such modeling to yield accurate results, mercury had to be added to the water. Dr. Arlen Andrews also reported that traces of mercury were discovered in the channels of the Saywite Stone. Meanwhile, the manipulation of liquids could have been part of some ritual. More accessible and traditional substances might have been used instead of mercury-infused water, such as the blood of sacrificed llamas or chicha, a corn-based beer. The ritual itself was likely simple, but it could have been visually striking. Liquid was poured over the lakes in the mountainous part of the stone, then flowed through miniature channels. From there, it reached the stone fields and finally drained into the perimeter holes via runoff grooves. It is said that the distribution of liquid across the monolith's surface was interpreted as a form of divination. The areas where more liquid collected were believed to indicate where the best harvest could be expected. There are also theories suggesting that the monolith represents a model of an actual city. One version posits that such a city may have once existed. However, no known settlement matches this model, and this theory remains speculative. Another theory suggests that the monolith was used to refine the layout and details of a future settlement. However, if that were the case, its creator would have required exceptional topographical skills. Without the necessary instruments, it would have been extremely difficult to craft a model that accurately replicated the features of a landscape spanning dozens of hectares. There is another original theory, which is broader in scale. According to it, the stone is not a model of a single city, but a three-dimensional representation of the geographical regions of the Inca Empire. The jungle, the highlands, the coast. In the jungle section, figures of monkeys, bears, caimans, and toads are located. On the coast, images of crabs, shrimp, an octopus, and a pelican are concentrated. In the highlands, one can see a llama, a condor, and a puma. In this interpretation, the depictions of structures are also explained accordingly. Those in the mountainous area are associated with Machu Picchu, Pisac, Tipon, and Ollantaytambo. Those in the jungle section correspond to Vilcabamba, Choqquequirao, and others. An even more intriguing theory suggests that the Saywite monolith is a stone allegory composed of ideographic symbols. Among them, felines stand out, carved on each of the 4 cardinal directions. These figures are also larger in size. At the source of the river, pairs of anthropomorphic gods can be seen. There is also a pair of monkeys, which in Incan culture symbolized fertility. It seems that all these theories, in one way or another, reflect the purpose of the stone. It may indeed have been a model of the world as envisioned by the Incas, a representation featuring significant places and their understanding of the world's structure. This might explain why nothing similar to the Saywite Stone has been found elsewhere in the empire. Objects of this kind are not created in large numbers and, by definition, hold a special status. Everything that could be considered somewhat similar does not come close in comparison. There are no sculptural compositions or carvings of the same level, such as in the Torrecunca region. The only vaguely comparable example, sharing some general similarities, is the carved rock at Cuenco. However, there is a strong possibility that the natural form and surface features of the Saywite monolith served as the basis for its design. This is supported by the presence of another stone, located just 4 kilometers from the complex. It shows a similar natural division, an upper part that is heavily eroded and a lower part that is smoother. If desired, it too could have served as the foundation for creating something similar. Given the uniqueness of the stone and the imagery carved on it, another question arises. Such features must have lent a certain significance to the entire site. However, its current name is not mentioned in historical chronicles. The records speak of about 100 ceremonial centers in this region, but identifying Saywite with any of them remains impossible. There is also no precise data on the age of the Saywite Stone. Officially, it is believed to have been created in the 10th or even the 15th century, possibly around the same time the Spanish were already conquering the empire. Alternative theorists argue that it was made by a highly advanced pre-Incan civilization, which would mean it is much older. As we can see, there is no shortage of theories. This is largely due to the lack of data that would allow definitive conclusions about the age, origin, and purpose of the Saywite Stone, as well as the overall age and structure of the entire complex. The first descriptions of this site date back to the mid-19th century, but they are mostly introductory and quite superficial. No systematic research has ever been conducted at Saywite. There is also no research on the order in which the sculptural compositions on the monolith were created, whether they were conceived as a single interconnected design with each element and figure assigned a predetermined place, or whether they were added spontaneously during the process of creation. Some suggest that certain details of the irrigation system on the stone may have been modified or even reworked over time. Such studies, however, are complicated by the fact that many figures on the stone have been damaged, making some of them difficult to identify. It is known that these damages occurred during the colonial period, when the Spanish deliberately destroyed everything related to local religion that could sustain the spirit of the Incas. Apart from structures directly related to the Incas and their culture, Saywite also features another category of objects with distinct technological characteristics. These include a series of worked stones, large preserved fragments of polygonal masonry, and several separate groups of polygonal blocks, the remains of former structures. Further down the slope, there are remnants of another polygonal structure, parts of which the Incas attempted to repurpose for their own needs. The shape of some blocks suggests that this site once contained a drainage system. At the entrance to the platform where the Saywite Stone is located, there is also a small group of polygonal blocks. These blocks were clearly once part of a larger masonry structure, as their joint profiles remain well defined. Some sections of the waterfall cascade stand out against the rough stone masonry, such as the receiving basins, monolithic blocks with drainage channels, and certain individual blocks. Even in the walls surrounding the cascade, there are stones whose quality of workmanship differs significantly from the rest. This raises the question of what the cascade originally looked like before the Incas took interest in it. Among the rubble stone masonry, some blocks in the side walls of passageways and niches also stand out due to their finer craftsmanship. Even within the masonry itself, some well-worked stones can be found. It is possible that additional blocks or even remnants of polygonal walls still lie buried underground. Overall, Saywite presents the same picture seen in other archaeological complexes, where Incan constructions replaced earlier polygonal structures. Some of the polygonal blocks were reused by the Incas, including in the reconstruction of the waterfall cascade. A portion of the surviving polygonal masonry was simply dismantled and taken away by local residents. During the Spanish colonial period, such blocks were widely used as free building material. At the same time, Incan structures remained untouched. There was no practical reason to dismantle them for ordinary stone. It appears that the Incas attempted to modify the worked stones in the lower sector as well. On the fractured monolith, there are several distinct groups of configurations forming interconnected compositions. Most of them are carefully crafted standard configurations of the seat and step types. The upper section consists of tiered platforms, some of which are visually linked to single seats on the right side. On the side wall of one of them, there is also a detail with stepped elements. On the large lower step, there is an additional protruding feature. A similar element can be seen on the configured stone nearby. However, the monolith also features groups of recesses with clear signs of manual work. On the top, these include grooves and round indentations, and on the rear side, large, rounded recesses. The workmanship of these features is noticeably of lower quality. This suggests that at least two different methods were used to create the recesses on this object. The first method produced precisely shaped configurations with finely finished surfaces. The second involved roughly shaping the recesses and only relatively smoothing the surfaces. This means that the second approach to working the material was fundamentally different. Clearly, the requirements for the final product also differed. They were in line with the construction techniques using unworked stone set in mortar. In other words, the niche in the rear part of the object was likely created by the same people who built the platforms and the cascade, and who carved the animal figures on the Saywite Stone. That is, the Incas. Similar manually worked recesses can be seen on other stones as well. As for the split itself, several theories attempt to explain how it occurred. One possible cause is a powerful earthquake. There are also more radical theories, such as the idea that the stone was once filled with high-tech equipment and was specifically targeted during the so-called War of the Gods. It is also plausible that, as in Uruk Rumi, Christian missionaries might have performed an exorcism ritual here. They could have built a fire around the stone to drive out demons and then doused it with water, causing it to crack. The nature of the damage on the nearby monolith, where the partitions are destroyed, may also support this interpretation. Another possibility is that an internal flaw in the stone, present from the beginning, was revealed during the carving process. This flaw may have been exacerbated by the deep recess made in the rear section, causing the stone to split along that point. The question then arises, who decided to carve such a deep niche in the rear part, and for what purpose? As for the fact that the detached half shifted and partially sank into the ground, there is nothing surprising about that. The area where the stone stands periodically becomes waterlogged, meaning that over time it could have gradually settled into the soft soil under its own weight. The remaining worked stones are smaller in size. However, their configurations, mainly in the form of chairs and steps, are crafted with the same level of precision. Currently, they are located near the split stone, but there are mentions that they were previously arranged differently. This seems plausible. Their current clustering appears more like a disorderly gathering, as if they were moved from their original locations. Another worked stone is situated separately, not far from the Rumiwasi platform. It is considered an Intihuatana. It is assumed that it may have been used for astronomical observations and as a gnomon. One argument in favor of this theory is that certain details on the stone align with specific astronomical events. For example, the configuration of the central partition nearly coincides with the north-south direction. In this interpretation, the role of the gnomon is attributed to the stepped recesses on the short partition and the square hole within it. Other elements of the stone, such as the side recess with a concave partition and the side with slanted protruding features, are not taken into account. Such selective interpretation raises questions. At the configuration on which conclusions about the stone's purpose are based belongs to the standard double chair type. Similar objects in other complexes do not have comparable astronomical associations. Perhaps more noteworthy is the fact that this stone features multiple configuration types at once. The aforementioned double chair with a step-like partition, a double composition formed by overlapping multiple chairs, and a more fluid configuration with its own partition adjoining from the side. Essentially, this stone contains three distinct and fully developed sectors, each with its own specific details. Therefore, any theory attempting to explain its purpose should consider all of these elements, rather than focusing selectively on certain aspects. Let's summarize briefly. It appears that the site of Saywite once housed a polygonal complex consisting of structures and worked stones. There was nothing particularly remarkable about it except for the significant presence of configured stones. Despite the complex being relatively small, the number of worked stones within it was comparable to that found in Sacsayhuaman, Chinchero, Machu Picchu, or even Cuenco. This suggests that the complex was in an early stage of development, and it seems that, for some reason, it was never completed. Another distinguishing feature is the abundance of water drainage systems, both the large cascade on the hillside and several isolated drains in the lower part of the complex. By the time the Incas arrived, the site was already abandoned. They restored some elements according to their needs and capabilities, transforming the site into yet another ceremonial center, similar to many others at the time. The final touch was the creation of the Saywite Stone. Its design may have been influenced by the natural shape and surface characteristics of the monolith. Just 4 kilometers from the complex, there is another stone with a similar natural division, an upper section that is heavily eroded and a lower section that is smoothly polished.